watching Reason and Theology Live. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
And welcome back to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael. On a Thursday, we are doing a second video here on, actually, this is probably the third now that I think about it, third video here on Our Lady of Fatima, at least recently speaking. Of course, because of the upcoming consecration on March the 25th by Pope Francis. And there have been quite a few follow-up questions from the last video that I did. One that I noticed that continues to come up very frequently is, will the upcoming consecration be valid if the bishops of the world don't participate and also consecrate Russia in their own diocese or somehow in union with the Pope? That has been a very, very common question that has been asked. So we're going to engage that along with, well, if Pope Francis is going to consecrate Russia, does that mean somehow that 1984 and the consecration there by John Paul II is not valid? And this is implicitly a papal acceptance of the idea that 84 was invalid. So we'll engage those among other questions. In order to do that, brought on Kevin Symonds, who is a Fatima scholar, well known on the channel. Welcome to the show, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Doing good. I understand you got a PowerPoint presentation for us to go over some of this, help us, to help navigate through these confusing times. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was able to pull it together, and but it's like preliminary thing. It's just like things I was able to put down just to help keep on track with some various topics. I can't get to everything, but I got I think the pretty good highlights of it all.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, I'll put it up so that we can see it and we can start to go through the PowerPoint. And everybody hold off on your questions until towards the end. If we have time, we'll be able to address some of those. Let's see.
Okay, I think we...
Okay. All right. Take it away.
Okay. Well, again, after the Holy Father's announcement there, that's why we're here to talk about all these issues, because it's created quite the stir. So we'll just kind of jump right into this, presuming I can actually get my clickers and everything going right. There we go. Okay. I didn't put like transition fades and slides or anything. It's pretty much straightforward. So, again, as I said, the presentation is in process. It's not definitive. Things could be added, subtracted, all that kind of stuff. But I just can't get to all of the details. We only have about an hour, give or take. So why are we here? What's the big deal? Well, a couple days ago, on March 15th, the Holy Father announced via Twitter that on Friday, March 25th, during the celebration of penance at 5 p.m. in St. Peter's Basilica, I will consecrate #Russia and #Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Well, that was a pretty big piece of news, and it set off a firestorm within the Catholic world. But why? Like, why this thing? So we're going to kind of just take a step back here and look at some of the background, because, again, we have to have the background right to get to the later stuff. So what happened was, on July 13th, 1917, Our Lady had appeared to the three shepherd children in Fatima, as we've talked about previously. And among other things, at that time, she said to them, quote, "I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she will be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved," etc. End quote. The three children kept this matter a secret for many years, though the two youngest had died in April 19 and February 1920. Then the last surviving seer, Lucia, left Fatima to study and eventually became a nun, first a Dorothean, then later a Carmelite nun. And throughout the rest of her life, Sister Lucia had further apparitions of Jesus and Mary. And there were two in particular that are very important: in Pontevedra in 1925 and Tui 1929. In Pontevedra, Our Lady provided Sister Lucia with the conditions for the communion of reparation devotion that was mentioned in 1917. Remember, Our Lady said, "I will come to ask for this now, this being fulfilled." At that time, she said, "Look, my daughter, at my heart surrounded with thorns, which ungrateful men at every moment pierce with blasphemies and ingratitude. You, at least, try to console me. Tell everyone that for 5 months, on the first Saturday, if they confess, receive Holy Communion, recite a 5-decade rosary, and pass 15 minutes with me in companionship, meditating on the mysteries of the rosary, with the end of making reparation to me, I promise to assist them in the hour of death with all the graces necessary for the salvation of their souls." End quote. Well, let's go back there. So this was basically the meat and potatoes of what the 5 First Saturdays devotion was going to be. So that was the first coming that Our Lady had said that she will come to ask for. Then in Tui in 1929, Our Lady appeared with the Holy Trinity, and the last fulfillment of that prophecy, "I shall come to ask," etc. She told Sister Lucia in Tui, quote, "The moment has come in which God asks the Holy Father, in union with all the bishops of the world, to make the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, promising to save it by this means. There are so many souls whom the justice of God condemns for sins committed against me, that I have come to ask reparation. Sacrifice yourself for this intention and pray." End quote. So now the moment had come, 1929, 1930, where the Holy Father had been asked specifically to consecrate Russia and avoid the spread of Russia's errors that had been predicted in 1917. Well, unfortunately, it didn't happen. Sister Lucia made efforts to inform her superiors and to get word to the Holy Father about heaven's request for the consecration of Russia, as well as the spreading of the devotion of the Immaculate Heart. Unfortunately, the consecration didn't happen in time, and Russia began to spread its errors, and World War II broke out. I hope you guys can see that graphic I have in the background. I try to put graphics that match the mood or the point being communicated. So I thought this was a very particularly good image to accentuate the point. So we're fighting fast and furious here because there's a lot to get to in a short time. There were papal consecration attempts, or attempts at the consecration by the popes. The first was Pope Pius XII in 1942 and 1952, and these efforts failed because he did not do it in communion with the bishops. Then there was Pope St. Paul VI in the 1960s. He, again, not done in communion with the bishops, and I don't know if Russia was specified either verbally or in his heart. I'm not entirely too sure about that, so I left it general up here with this one comment. Then we come to the pontificate of Pope St. John Paul II, and he attempted it first in 1982, but again, it wasn't done in communion with all the bishops. Then again, he attempted it on March 25th, 1984. But this time, he did some groundwork, and the bishops had been asked to join the Holy Father in this effort. And the consecration was done on this day, performed before the statue of Our Lady of Fatima that had been brought to Rome from the Chapel of Apparitions in Fatima. And that was kind of like the last word on that subject from Rome generally, at least in the public. So that then asks the question, did the 1984 consecration fulfill Our Lady's requests? We have to be honest and say that during the period of 1984 to 1989, this burning question was present. Did it fulfill Our Lady's request? The only person who could truly answer that question was Sister Lucia. And there are conflicting reports about Sister Lucia's thoughts on the 1984 consecration. Again, we have to be very blunt about this. Various statements were published that claimed that she stated that the 84 consecration did not fulfill Our Lady's requests. And among the things that you'll find in the literature is John Paul II had consecrated the world, not Russia by name, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And so those, just a quick word about those keeping alive this question, they were people who were associated with the popular movement within the church known as the traditional movement, otherwise known as traditionalists. In France, you had the organization Le Contre-Réforme Catholique that was founded by the Abbé Georges de Nantes. And then in Canada or the United States, you had Father Nicholas Gruner and his organization called the Fatima Center, as well as several of various associates of his. There are also associates with the Abbé de Nantes, including a gentleman named Frère Michel de la Sainte Trinité, who wrote 3 very popular books within the traditionalist movement on Fatima. And you see those images here on the left side of your screen. These are the original French covers. So these arguments and the people advancing them, they quoted from both private as well as public sources to prove their belief that the 1984 consecration did not fulfill Our Lady's request. And there are 2 notable ones that I've been able to popped up to my attention while going over the available literature. Sol de Fatima in Spain, 1985, and another publication called Prioress in Argentina in 1987. And these 2 sources, to the best of my knowledge, have not been reproduced in the public forum. They are rather obscure and they haven't been studied, but yet you'll find them in footnotes and even recent videos that I've made or that appeared in Reason and Theology. I hear people talking about this. What about Sol de Fatima, 1985? Well, really? Can you show me the text, please? Just the other day, Matt Gaspers from Catholic Family News had cited page, where's the book? Yes, here it is. Page 51 of Christopher Ferrara's book, False Friends of Fatima. And on page, this was in a tweet, I believe. And Father Gaspers is quoting this because he gives some timeline here in the book, Ferrara does, that is, about the Sol de Fatima, and he's got the footnotes referring people to various sources, including the Abbé Georges de Nantes' other associate. Let's see. Yes, here it is. Frère François de Marie des Anges, who took over for Frère Michel in 1989-1990. And the citation is to this particular book. Well, I've been busy looking this stuff up lately because it's like, okay, my area of specialty in Fatima is more about the third part of the secret. So I've had to get a little bit of more of a crash course going further into the question of the consecration of Russia. So I don't claim to be an expert on this. That's partly why I'm keeping this information fairly basic. But in looking over everything, you begin to see a circular pattern developing here. Gaspers quotes Ferrara. Ferrara quotes Frère François. Frère François cites these publications, but where are these publications? Can somebody please put them in the public forum so we can, so that they can be subject to scrutiny and be able to see what was said? Otherwise we're just taking Frère François' word for it. So it's creating a problem. So we need these texts in the public forum. So if anybody has access to these to this documentation, please put it out there. So moving on, again, there's that contentious period between 84 to 89. But 1989, we start seeing statements from Sister Lucia. And in August 29th, 1989, she wrote a letter to Irma Maria de Belém, and she answers the question in the affirmative. This is an actual copy of the letter that you see here. On the left is the Portuguese, and on the right is the English translation. And these images are courtesy of Mr. John Price from the Fatima Family Apostolate down in Hanceville, Alabama. I was present at the museum there, and I was able to take these photos. I think you're allowed to take photos, but if not, I was permitted to do so, so I'm very grateful for that. But she very clearly states that John Paul II had written to all the bishops of the world, asking them to unite with him. He sent for the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and when they asked her if this consecration was made as Our Lady requested, she said yes. Now it was made. And then she goes on to explain why that component with all the bishops is so important. So if later, if people want to review, they can hit the pause button and look at the video for themselves. And I must ask everybody's indulgence for 1 second. I need to look at something real quick that has popped up. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. Thank you. Again, I apologize about that. Okay. So then moving on, Unknown to the general public, Sister Lucia had also began writing a new book on or around or just after September the 9th, 1983. And then she had little time, she says, so she had to devote herself bit by bit to this particular project. The manuscript was published after her death in 2005 under the title Como Vejo a Mensagem, How I See the Message, a picture of which you see here on your screen. Between pages 53 and 58, Sister Lucia not only affirmed that the 1984 consecration fulfilled Our Lady's request, but she also indicated that it averted a nuclear war. So I decided to make the pages in the English translation, not the original Portuguese, but the English translation, which, bestest to my understanding, looks pretty faithful to the Portuguese. But if you look at the image real quick on the lower right-hand side, Sister Lucia starts talking about how the Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, she will be converted, the Immaculate Heart will triumph, etc., etc. Period peace will granted to the world. And she explains this promise of peace refers to the wars provoked throughout the world on account of the errors emanating from Russia. And then this is the money quote on page 54. This consecration, top left of the page, was made publicly in Rome by the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, on 25th March 1984 before the image of Our Lady of Fatima, which is venerated in the Chapel of the Apparitions in the Cova de Iria Fatima, etc., etc. And then if you note in the next paragraph, she starts talking about this. We were in a critical moment. The great powers were hostile to one another, planning and preparing for a nuclear war, which would destroy the world, if not entirely to a considerable extent. And then she asks, and what chances of survival would there be for the part that would be left? Now we fast forward a little bit more throughout to the text. Bottom right-hand side on page 55, after all this, Sister says, there are still blind people who cannot see or do not wish to see and who say, but there are still wars going on in the world, and Our Lady promised peace. Sound familiar? Have we not been hearing this in reference to Russia and Ukraine lately? Yes, Our Lady, continued Sister, promised peace in reference to the wars provoked throughout the world by atheistic communism, without referring to civil wars, which there have always been and will always be, until it pleases God to change this world, as Jesus Christ said, into a new earth and a new heaven, like the little seed that dies and thrown into the earth, and then from this apparent death then bursts forth the new life in a more vigorous plant, etc., etc. She reiterates what the word conversion means, to undergo a transformation, and then prompts in the period of peace. Sister, if it wasn't explicit before, now she's explicit again. This promise of Our Lady refers to the wars provoked throughout the world by atheistic communism, and it is over these wars that the Lady said that her Immaculate Heart will triumph. It is to this that she is referring. Top of the next page, she talks about how communism was the greatest heresy to appear at any time in the world, and carrying its errors to all the ends of the earth, I should say. And also from the danger, she says, of a nuclear war, which would destroy a great part of his creative and redemptive work, the people of God chosen for eternal life. So again, now she's being really, really explicit. This nuclear war. All right. And then the last page, a little bit more commentary. People want to pause and kind of just soak in more of what Sister Lucia said. I recommend that, but we have to continue because of time constraints. Sad to say. Sister Lucia also wrote to Father Robert Fox, the head of the Fatima family apostolate, then in South Dakota, now in Alabama, I believe, remember correctly. She also wrote in 1990, you see on the left, these are actual images taken by me at the museum in Alabama back in 2016. The Portuguese is on the left. The English translation is the upper right. And here's an actual color copy of the envelope, postmarked and everything. I think this might be exclusive to Frasian Theology. I don't know if the original letter has ever appeared anywhere on the internet the envelope, I should say, with in color and all that. I don't know if it has. I think reproductions have appeared, but they've been edited out a little bit. I believe that's Father Robert Fox's handwriting, what it says on the envelope from Sister Lucia, or Lucia, I guess. And so she again answers the question. Yes, it was accomplished. And since then, I have said that it was made. She says also, because there was a question at this time in the late 80s, early 90s, well, these are typewritten letters. Sister Lucia wrote everything by hand. Well, she addresses that and she says, no other person responds for me. I receive and open all letters and respond to them. And it's very clear. I mean, this is the original letter taken. It's in a shadow box or shadow case in the museum, and I was able to get a good shot of it. Father Fox, to add more authenticity, he had these things certified by a certified graphologist named Fran Miller down in Kansas. Copy of which you can see the letter here, which is also in display at the museum down there in Alabama, at least as of 2016. Then the Mother Prioress of the Carmel of Coimbra also had a few words to say to Father Nicholas Gruner in the early 90s. She basically said to him in so many words, you've worn out our hospitality, you take advantage of things that happen in here, you're not in good standing with the hierarchy, and that's important to us, so all we can really do is pray for you to our Lord and Our Lady. And it was signed by Sister Maria do Carmo de San João da Cruz, who was then the prioress. So we can see things are kind of heating up here, saying, who's who, who's doing what, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the actual letter on display in the Fatima Museum in Alabama. Literally right up the road from Mother Angelica Shrine, by the way. The dispute continued over the 1984 consecration into the 90s, of course, as we kind of just saw. But this gentleman here, this is a screenshot from his video on YouTube. His name Carlos Evaristo. Between 1992 and 93, he had interviewed Sister Lucia, and he even published the book in 1997, 2 interviews with Sister Lucia. And he also visited her with a cardinal, Cardinal Vidal, I think it was, from the Philippines, and he served as the translator. Video was taken of this interview, and it has been made available on YouTube. I know you can't access the links here, but maybe Mr. Lofton can pull it and put it in the video description below this podcast. And the video of the meeting between Sister Lucia was aired in Portuguese media back in 1998. I made the video possible here. It starts from like the 8.5 minute mark onward, I think. I don't think we have time to show the video, but the clip in the YouTube video shows the Portuguese journalist talking, introducing things, and it's Sister Lucia on camera talking about this, and she upholds. She says, "No, it was done." So it's very clear. She's on camera saying these things. Oh, look at that! It does show. Oh, okay. Just real quick, just so people can get a flavor for it.
São revelações surpreendentes da irmã Lucia, a única vidente viva dos fenómenos da Copa da Iria. Em 2 entrevistas separadas, concedidas a 2 cardeais, a irmã Lucia aconselha o Papa a não revelar o terceiro segredo de Fátima, mas se fizer que seja com muita prudência. A segunda entrevista foi gravada por um seminarista, filmador, que acompanhava os cardeais, assim que teve acesso a parte dessa gravação. Entre as declarações mais surpreendentes, a irmã Lucia...
You're going to hear Sister Lucia's voice. So here she is talking about what the word conversion means.
Nesta conversa, a vidente de Fátima diz que a conversão da Rússia está concluída graças ao jeito daquilo que defende como o comunismo ateu, está, portanto, cumprida a profecia da Virgem Maria.
Pay attention to this point that she's saying here. See how consistent she is? All right. So we have to move on, but people, again, the video's on YouTube, they can see it, and I don't want to offend copyrights or anything. So we have to move on, unfortunately, but you get the general flavor for it. I mean, there she is on camera talking about this, talking about these matters. Hold on, let me see if there we go. Okay. So we don't have time to unfortunately do the whole video, but again, she's talking about this. It fulfilled Our Lady's request. She also explains what the word convert means. It didn't mean convert to Roman Catholicism. A lot of people thought that for many decades. And her discourse to the cardinal is entirely consistent with what we read in Como Vejo a Mensagem. So we see a change in her understanding of things, which is consistent with her ongoing education and further reflection upon the message and reading the scriptures and stuff like that. It's very harmonious. Evaristo's claims were criticized by the Fatima Center, and attempts were made to disrepute him. But the problem there was Evaristo used to be in Father Gruner's inner circle. And so that didn't make it an easy task to attempt to disrepute him. And Evaristo continues to live in Portugal today and can be found on Facebook. Full disclosure, I have spoken with Evaristo in the past to kind of get some understandings and just talk to him as somebody who lived through this period of time. So, just full disclosure on that. But these are the general highlights of his involvement with this story. Then in the year 2000, the third part of The Secret was published, and a letter from Sister Lucia was cited that was dated to November the 8th, 1989, verifying the 1984 consecration. But this letter was criticized by people such as like the Fatima Center and others, because it was thought to be a false letter to a Mr. Walter Nolker. But when I looked at the evidence for this supporting their criticism, I looked at it and I said, well, no one appears, first of all, to have asked if she wrote 2 letters on that day. I seem to recall something when I was looking over the biography of Sister Lucia that she wrote 2 letters on one day once. So I'm going, okay, well, who's to say she didn't do it again? But even still, one of the main arguments that they bring against the authenticity of this letter to Mr. Nolker, separated the question of whether or not we're talking about the same letter here or not, of course, but was that she mentioned Paul VI tried to do a consecration in 67 or 64 or something like that, but the date was wrong. And I'm going, well, have you ever heard of a typo? Maybe she just simply confused her dates. She's done that before. People with respect to the August apparition of 1917, it could have just a simple memory, lapse in memory. I mean, so I wasn't impressed by the line of argumentation. Now there may have been other arguments. I'm not sure, but either which way, this was one of the latest run-ups to this in the background that we're discussing. So from 2000 to the present, many Catholics, traditionalist Catholics, so to speak, they never accepted, they always questioned the 1984 consecration. And for the past 38 years, this matter has been extremely contentious. Our Lady's words in Portuguese were algum tempo de paz, some time or some period of peace. And one of their arguments was that this period of peace prophesied by Our Lady means a kind of world peace. Recently, Robert Sungenis and Dr. Robert Mazza had talked about this over on the Meeting of Catholic in a debate, and they actually talked about this, and both of them declared that they don't believe in this, world peace interpretation. I was glad to see that. Then some also believe that Our Lady's words, Russia will be converted, means that the country will convert to Roman Catholicism. Well, that hasn't happened, so people believe, therefore, the 84 consecration didn't apply. And so continued calls for Russia to be consecrated happened. Among other arguments, of course. These are just some of the basic ones. So at present now we have the war, and it is a war. I don't care what anybody else says, it's a war, between Russia and Ukraine. It sparked the question of this consecration's validity once again, because the question being, if Russia was consecrated in 1984, why is this country now warring against Ukraine? Doesn't this prove that Russia never truly converted? Then the Ukrainian Catholic bishops, if I remember correctly, if that's, I think they were the Catholic bishops, the conference there, requested the Holy Father to, quote, perform the act of consecration to the Sacred Immaculate Heart of Mary of Ukraine and Russia, as requested by the Blessed Virgin in Fatima. Unfortunately, end quote, by the way, I don't speak Ukrainian, but I put the text in question down below. I understand that there might be someone here in the live chat that could fine-tune this translation, but the general gist was they asked the Holy Father to consecrate the country to the Immaculate Heart as well as with Russia. And the way that it was worded, at least in the initial reports, it made it sound like the Ukrainian bishops were siding now with the traditionalists in their rejection of the 84 consecration. Why? Because if there's no reference to the 84 consecration, simply, please fulfill Our Lady's requests, Your Holy Father. Well, that sounds like they don't believe in this. And so their statement now became a cause célèbre among many traditionalists. Because now they've got power, they've got bishops backing their position now, or at least seemingly backing them. So all of this now brings us to the Holy Father's announcement of March 15th. Hopes and expectations have arisen for this act to finally, so to speak, fulfill Our Lady's request for the consecration of Russia. But wait, not so fast. Objections are already coming up. I myself have seen these sorts of things or heard about them. No, this Pope can't do it. He's a heretic and deprived of office. No, Benedict XVI is still the Pope. Our Lady said Russia, not Russia and Ukraine. This won't stick. The Pope hasn't said he'll do it in union with all the bishops of the world. This is just a sampling of some of the things that, I've seen myself or heard about from others. I've seen them actually, Mr. Lofton, when you did the podcast the other day, 2 days ago, I was in the chat room and I was watching things, and some of those comments were appearing in there. And then later on, I was in another chat and I saw more of those same comments popping up. So the question is, what will happen? Where do we go from here? What's going to happen when the Pope does this? Where do we go from here? So my personal opinion, there are only two possible foundations upon which this upcoming effort will be based. The 1984 consecration did not fulfill Our Lady's request, or the 1984 consecration did fulfill Our Lady's request. So let's kind of walk down both paths a little bit and explore this for a little bit. Beginning with did not fulfill. The Holy Father's present effort then may or may not finally fulfill the request. It depends upon the Holy Father's intentions, the words that are used, and the matter of the bishop's participation in this effort, because again, all these conditions have to be fulfilled. If all of these things are met, then the request would finally be fulfilled. If not, then the controversy will continue, and if it does, may the Lord help us, because it'll never end. But if the 84 consecration did fulfill Our Lady's request, I think then that Pope Francis's effort might have a salutary effect on present events, thanks be to God. The Holy Father might perform this act in harmony with his predecessors from 1984, there's John Paul II, in 1984. He might even do it in communion with the bishops. But again, if it was already fulfilled in 84, there is no need for him to do it in communion with the bishops. He can just do this as a further act of piety and devotion, and it certainly have a salutary effect, I think. So again, it just depends on what foundation is this being constructed on. So based upon these thoughts, then, some general considerations or further thoughts are, we have to be careful not to engage in superstition. Getting words just right in order to achieve some desired effect is the very definition of superstition. Kind of like, you must say this novena for 9 days in 9 different churches on 9 different days at the 9th hour in order to achieve whatever this desired end is. That's superstition. And so we have to be careful that we don't want to start going off into that. And a lot of these debates have started going into that area, or very borderline to it, and it's sad to see. But the next issue is, with Sister Lucia having died in 2005, who is now going to verify the efficacy of Pope Francis's act of consecration, presuming for a moment that it's that the original 84 one didn't take? The only argument to be had here is that the proof will be in the pudding. In other words, we have to look at what happens after the Holy Father's act of consecration. And that gets a little dicey. Why? Because these understandings are subjective. Russia converts and some time of peace is given. What do these mean? Well, we already saw with Sister Lucy's understanding. We saw it on the video, we saw it in the writings. I personally have some grave concerns about all of this. I think that there's much subjectivity in place here, and a rather wide variance of opinion is present. And will everyone be pleased? If not, why? I have doubts. I'm sorry to say, I don't really think it's going to settle anything. Barring lights coming from the heavens the moment that the Pope does this, and suddenly everybody's holding hands, singing songs together. Barring anything like that, I don't know if people are going to be pleased with this. I just don't, because there's such that wide variance of opinion. So I wish to be fair now, especially to the many traditionalists who ask about the question of the 84 consecration of the world. There are questions, like we've seen so far in this PowerPoint, and there's room for scholarly efforts to study the available documentation. I have to stress this point. And without good scholars looking at this, objective scholars looking at it, it's going to be continued arguments back and forth ad nauseam. And the internet is not the place to hash it out. So I encourage people, we can't jump to conclusions and think ahead of the church. We have to think with the church. And the traditional Latin expression for this is sentire cum ecclesia, to think with the church. And these continued catcalls against the Holy Father are uncalled for and are very disrespectful. They are very contrary to the message of Our Lady at Fatima, which talked about praying for the Pope and making sacrifices, etc., etc. So I want to give the last word to Bishop Thomas Tobin of Providence, Rhode Island, who he put a tweet out there recently that said, quote, "The consecration of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary is truly a beautiful spiritual gesture, but we need to avoid using it as a magic wand, an instant solution to the problems of the world. We must pray with faith, trust, patience, and acceptance of God's will." And that is the PowerPoint itself. I'm going to just stop sharing the screen here so we don't have any issues there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And y'all go ahead and start sending chat questions. So just to clarify, when Pope Francis goes to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary on March 25th, if all of the bishops of the world do not join in with him, and if 84 for some reason wasn't valid, would that then mean Francis's consecration is not valid if all the other bishops of the world don't join in?
If again, we're basing ourselves on that foundation of the 84 consecration didn't do it,
right?
Then yes, that would be the case. What you just described.
In the 84 consecration, was there a moral majority of participation among the bishops in consecrating Russia?
Again, as not an expert on the question of the consecration, but I do know that through the readings that I've done over the years, the expression was used that yes, there was at least the moral majority or totality of the bishops that had participated in it after the Holy Father's request.
And what role do the laity play when it comes to the consecration? Do they have to do the first 5 Saturday devotions in order for this to be, for the words of Our Lady to be effective?
I think it complements it. I think it is part of it. Our Lady asked for these 2 things, and I think that it is a necessary component for people to pray and amend their lives. There can be no true absolution of sin without some form of contrition. And what is it that we say in the act of contrition? We promise to amend our lives. And this devotion is meant to help people inculcate Our Lady's, the interior life of Our Lady, in her disposition towards God and His grace, which necessarily is going to complement all of these things and bring people back to God. So I think it's a necessary component. I think it complements it. And I don't know if I'd say everything hangs on that necessarily being a part of it, that's something that I think the scholars will be debating maybe a little bit in the finer edging of things. But certainly we have a fire lit under us to do it. Why not the small stuff? Let's just do it.
Did Our Lady say that it was required that the laity do the first 5 Saturday devotions?
I don't remember that word being used, required. But she proposed it, and it was part of her requests. But to use the word required,
like a condition.
I don't remember it being like a conditio sine qua non or anything like that. I don't recall that in Our Lady's words. She proposes it. She says these are the two things that and if my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. But the question is, she said requests, and what were her requests? The devotion and the consecration. So, I mean, you can make a really good argument that that's what Our Lady meant. Again, required in like an official dogmatic, you're going to go to hell if you don't do this sense. No, required in the sense of this is what's being proposed, and they both go together. Yes, it just depends upon what sense we want to use the word required. But she doesn't use that word, no.
In the video that you showed of Sister Lucia, I don't recall her at any point saying that the 84 consecration was valid in that footage. Although it seems implied in her argumentation. What would you say in response to those who say, well, she doesn't actually say in the video footage that the 84 consecration was accepted by heaven? What would you say to that?
I actually have to kick that back to Carlos Evaristo himself, and I say this with all due respect. I would like to see the full unadulterated tape out there on the internet. The clip itself does not show it to the best of my knowledge, but when you read Evaristo's book, I only have the French translation here. But I don't have the Portuguese or the English translation. I thought I had the Portuguese. I was looking for it earlier today, and I was like, "Where did it go?" But I don't think I have it. At least not on hand. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that she does address it in these books. Because what happened was there were 2 interviews. The first one was not recorded, but it was witnessed by one of the top Fatima experts, Monsignor José Geraldes Freire. And the second interview, I believe, is the one with the cardinal. So both interviews make it in there. So the video it's not on video, strictly speaking, but as taken as a whole between the 2 interviews, I want to say that it is discussed. And because Father Freire backs up, at least the first, he writes a foreword actually to the whole book. That's a pretty serious thing, because Father Freire, before his death a few years ago, he was one of the heavy hitters in Fatima studies, and he taught at the University of Coimbra, I think it was, which was one of the most respected universities in Portugal. Has a long history, and so he's no slouch. And if he's backing it up, saying nope, what's in this book is true, I was there at least for half of it, then I mean, that's very serious. That's a very weighty matter. That can't be dismissed very lightly. So again, taken together as a whole, of which the video is only the second half of it. At least I think, if I remember correctly, I have to do a little more deep diving to make sure, but I think that's what it was. I think that was the second interview, not the first one. I know I talked to Carlos about this, and we talked about it like 4 or 5 years ago. So maybe my memory is failing me, and if it is, I do apologize. I don't mean to misrepresent anybody. But it would be nice if, at the very least, if we could see the whole video from beginning to end. The quality is poor, as was mentioned in some of the publications, but it's. I mean, you can sit and listen to it. I mean, it's there. It's up on YouTube.
This is from River, super chat comment here. All the Pope's public general sanctifying acts are in union with all the bishops. Otherwise, we'd have to suppose odd things about union and formality. What do you think about that?
He's right in one sense, but with respect to the present matter, it has to be there needs to be a very specific intention going back to what I think referenced a little while ago about what the reasoning for having all the bishops do this. Yes, in general, there is that unity, but there has to be a specific act on the part of the world's bishops. So River is correct. He's correct. But when it comes to the specific requests of what Our Lady had asked for, that would, I mean, in a word, it would that's not sufficient. It has to be a recognition, which requires an act itself, not just a passive sort of thing. There has to be more of a direct act to highlight this and to show to show that to the unity of the bishops and the popes and all of that, which was very important. We talked about this in one of my webinars last year here on Reason and Theology about how the disunity in the church. I think it was towards the latter couple last ones there of the webinars about all that disunity, and it's Our Lady even appeared to Sister Lucia, I think it was 1979, because Sister was very upset over all of what was happening, all the errors that had come into the church. And Our Lady had appeared and comforted her. And the vision is actually recounted in the Carmelites' biography. There's a whole chapter dedicated to the later apparitions of Our Lady to Sister Lucia. And that's an important point in there about praying, intensifying her prayers for the unity of the church and the bishops and the priests with the Pope and everything. So that's part of the message of Fatima, is having that unity, not saying horrible things off to the side, So that's how so River again is right with one sense, but to the question at hand, it's not enough.
So Catholic Gabe asks, what are some good reading recommendations? Are you interested in possibly publishing a book on this consecration?
I have thought about it, actually. I have. I've already made one contact, actually, to try to get Sol de Fatima and Parati publications. I don't know if I'll actually obtain them, but I definitely would like to see them. If I write a book on it, I don't know if I would write something as extensive like what I did for the third part of The Secret of Fatima. But I mean, it's possible. It would probably be a bit of a thinner volume. And then the first part of the question was the reading materials, right?
All right.
The Carmelites' biography is always a good one. I can't stress their biography enough. It is available in English. The book we were referencing to, Como Vejo a Mensagem, but also her book Calls from the Message of Fatima is another good one. This is basically a catechesis on Fatima. And if you want to know, y'all want to know a little secret, the introduction or the nota previa, it begins on page 3, at least in the Portuguese edition. It is signed by the then Bishop of Fatima, Bishop Seraphim de Sousa Ferreira Silva. But somebody told me in Fatima that, in fact, it wasn't Bishop de Silva that wrote it, Bishop Seraphim, it was Cardinal Ratzinger that wrote that. So, interesting little factoid. I have to have it verified, but I think 2 people have told me that, in fact, that was the case. So I hope I'm not spreading falsehoods or lies or anything, but that would be one good book to read, if nothing else. Father Fox's book, The Intimate Life of Sister Lucia, is another great, powerful read. He walks you through everything, and he bases himself upon the information that's available in the documents and the letters and stuff. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. What else? Father John de Marquis, he has some really good books on the subject. The later editions, I think, are the better ones. There was his first edition where it had to be corrected, but the later ones were pretty good. Renzo and Roberto Allegri's book, The Story Behind the Miracles. This is another good one. And it's not the first time I've done this, but I'm going to show you. There was a book. Well, there's a very famous figure in Fatima's history called Father Joseph Schweigel. And he actually interviewed Sister Lucia in the early 1950s. And what a lot of people don't know is he actually wrote a book and it was about Russia and the Fatima, and I think the question of the consecration. So I have the German edition. There was originally published in Italian, and I don't have a copy of that. But nevertheless, we have the German edition here. Very hard to find this book, but I managed to get a copy. Most everything by Alder Miguel, the Portuguese journalist, is also pretty good. Yeah, I mean, those are anything from Father Antonio Maria Martins would be another one. But also the critical documentation on Fatima published by the Sanctuary of Fatima. This has the primary source documents, the witnesses, and everything. And then, lastly, we have Lucia's memoirs. There is a critical edition now published by Dr. Christina Sobral. This is an original copy. I got it the day that the day that they published it and got it out there. It was the day I got a copy because I happened to be in Fatima at the time. So those are some good books I would read. I strongly recommend to people.
Does the consecration of Russia mean that Russia will become Roman Catholic?
No. According to Sister Lucia, that's not what Our Lady intended. The word conversion means to go from something bad to something good, she says. And in this case, to go from atheistic communism and stopping the persecutions of the church. And so that was the intention of that, was to stop the persecutions, and to allow faith to be professed once again in Russia, really without the hindrance of atheistic communism. That's the nuts and bolts of what that means, according to Sister Lucia.
Thunder Thumbs asks, what do you think about the accuracy of the CDF's interpretation of the secret of Fatima? Thoughts there?
We actually covered that in the webinars. So here at Reason and Theology. So I would encourage people to take a look at those webinars again. I think the Vatican had a lot of excellent points. There are some that I think we could kind of talk about. It wasn't an official interpretation in the sense of everybody was bound to accept it. So if done in charity, there's room to discuss that. There was another part of that about that last message.
About the Holy Father dying. Some people interpret it as the Holy Father dying.
Yes, I get to announce Father Charles Murr's book, Murder in the 33rd Degree, is coming out in about a week or two through Amazon. And I think when people read that book, they're going to start rethinking some things. And this is something that we can honestly, I think, talk about. I don't want to steal the man's thunder, but I will say he offers us an interesting interpretation on the death of Pope John Paul I. And it is based upon that interpretation, we might be able to rethink a little bit what the imagery meant of the Pope falling dead in the third part of the Secret of Fatima. So stay tuned, get that book. It's a page turner.
If the Orthodox have valid bishops, shouldn't Fatima's formula, all the bishops of the world, need some participation from Orthodox bishops as well?
I don't think that's how it's been understood. Bishops in communion with the Holy Father generally means the Catholic Church, not the Orthodox bishops. One would certainly it wouldn't hurt. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, or Our Lady would have said, no, sorry, you're over there, you can't do it. No, I think, John Paul II would have gladly welcomed some of the Eastern Orthodox bishops there in Rome had that have happened, and not just necessarily for ecumenical concerns. But I don't think it was bound to have. I don't think that was one of the conditions, because Our Lady never mentions Eastern Orthodoxy in the message. So it's kind of hard to read that back into it at that point then.
I think we cleared out all of the questions. I'm not seeing any others. Looks like everything else is comments. So I think we'll probably end it there anyway, because we only had an hour and we're right at the hour. So any concluding comments you wanted to throw in there?
I hope everybody joins the Holy Father on the 25th. I hope that there's a very positive, salutary effect. There's already some peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, so maybe that will go well. But I hope that everything goes well, and everybody just pray with the Holy Father on that day, at that time, especially. So let's unite ourselves and pray with the Holy Father and see what God has in store for us.
There is a question here. Do you have a list of resources on your website by any chance?
Like books and stuff?
Yeah, on Fatima. Articles, books.
Oh, of these resources? No, I probably should, though, shouldn't I? Make it a lot
Forthcoming.
easier. Yeah. So Teresa, good. Thank you for giving me an idea. One more thing to add to my list, right? Yeah, maybe I could. Yeah, I mean, if you go there, you'll see like where the webinars are and and stuff. But no, a list of books, where to find them. No, unfortunately, I don't. Sorry.
No problem. All right. I appreciate you coming on and doing this. This was incredibly helpful. Go ahead and put in a plug for the Fatima course that you're going to be teaching.
Oh, yeah. We don't have time, though, to show the trailer, do we?
Go ahead.
We do? Oh.
Yeah, we got a minute.
Oh, it's 2 minutes.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Hold on. I forgot all about it, so I have to pull it up here.
I got about 5 minutes left, so we got just enough time to sneak it in there.
Okay. All right. Well, may I be blessed.
And I'll put it in the show notes too, a link to it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we can share the screen and play it real quick.
Okay. Share screen. Yes. Okay. Technology, isn't it wonderful?
There it is.
It is. Okay.
Let's do it.
Here we go.
All right. I wasn't able to hear the audio fully, so I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that in the show notes. So y'all make sure to take a look at it, and you can go and click on the link and watch the trailer there as well. And give us the website one more time where they'll need to go.
They just go to my website, kevinsymonds.com, KEVINSYMONDS.com. And I think the first post at the top has it, and you can click around and it'll take you where you need to go.
And for those who don't know what show notes are, that's the description of the video. You can normally find it by just clicking on the description underneath the actual video screen on YouTube. So I'll add that here in just a moment, so y'all can see it here shortly. All right. Once again, thanks for coming on, Kevin. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you. God bless.
And everybody, thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already to support what we're doing here. Also, check me out, patreon.com/Reason in Theology, or hit the join button here to become a member of the channel. Either way, you'll get access to extra content, and you'll support what we're doing here. All right. We'll see you later. God bless. Hey, RNT fans, if you're looking to buy a home or sell a home and would like a realtor who shares your beliefs, be sure to check out our sponsor, realestateforlife.org, and be sure to tell them Reason in Theology